Welcome back. This is topic 10 in the Busch History series on American history. And this is 10.2 specifically, following 10.1, which is an overview of how we expanded in chunks. This is a PowerPoint. 10.2 is a PowerPoint going through step-by-step progression of how we actually got these pieces, so there's some more information. And 10.3 is going to be a quiz, just for the heck of it. We're going to try this quiz and see if that works. I haven't tried one of those before, and we'll take a look at it. So let's get started here, and let's see how we look at the United States. Just as a recap, we grow in pieces. We have the East Coast of the United States, the 13 colonies, the Ohio Valley, Florida, Louisiana Purchase, the annexation of Texas in 1845, the southwest part of the United States in 1848, part of the Mexican Cession, the whole Oregon Territory settling the border between Canada and the United States in 1846, and the Gadsden Purchase from Mexico in 1853. So those are the pieces of the United States. Add to that Alaska, which is actually up here, in 1867, and Hawaii in 1898, and that's pretty much how the United States grows. We grow in pieces like a puzzle. Let's take a look at what this does to us. First, big concern we're going to have after Louisiana is this whole Missouri crisis, and which is going to end up in the Missouri Compromise. And Henry Clay, the father of the American system, is going to be part of settling this problem. Let's take a look. Background of the Missouri Compromise. Since the Missouri crisis, which began in 1819, Missouri wanted to enter the Union as a slave state. If they enter as a slave state, it's going to upset the balance in the Senate and the House of Representatives. And of course, Southern expansionists liked this idea and Northern expansionists didn't. And we're going to end up with a very interesting compromise. And it's going to be called the Missouri Compromise. Over here, Maine wants to enter as a free state at exactly the same time, which is pretty cool. So we're going to get the Missouri Compromise in 1820, which settles the Missouri crisis. And the details are exactly as: no slavery above the 3630 parallel, which is the southern border of Missouri, which is right there. Missouri could be a slave state. Maine would be a free state. Expansion of slavery raised all kinds of constitutional problems, because remember, the Constitution allows slavery. And if the Constitution allows slavery, because of the whole Three-Fifths Compromise then as we expand, we have to continue to allow slavery, or we have to amend the Constitution, which will ultimately be the solution to this with the 13th Amendment, but not yet. The Missouri Compromise is going to hold for 30 years. Missouri and Maine were admitted to the Union as proposed by Clay, and he gets the nickname the Great Pacificator, or the Great Compromiser, because while on the face of it, pretty simple, because Maine was certainly never going to be a slave state, still, it solves the problem. The question of expansion of slavery was not opened up again until we get to the Mexican War. And the Mexican War was going to deal with what do we do with the entire southwest part of the United States, certainly. The Compromise of 1850 did not abide by the Missouri Compromise, because now it said you could go catch runaway slaves, which meant that slavery would extend throughout the entire northern part of the country. And then the Missouri Compromise was in effect repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854. So here we get another look at the Missouri Compromise. East Coast, Ohio Valley, Arkansas Territory, unorganized territory, part of Louisiana Purchase, and Missouri. Missouri sticks up kind of like a wart in the middle of the United States. Well, Missouri, slave, Maine, free, Compromise of 1820, Missouri Compromise, and it's going to hold for a while, but look at what waits for us. Now we're going to get to the Mexican-American War. The Mexican-American War is settled ultimately, the dispute is settled. Ultimately, Mexico surrenders, and we're going to get the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo signed on February 2nd, 1848. And we're going to get the entire southwest part of the United States from Mexico. James K. Polk actually wanted more. He wanted a lot of Mexico. We end up giving the Mexicans $15 million, and we also give them $2 million for specific individual claims against the United States. Emerson was warning that we'll conquer Mexico, but it'll be like a poison, because Mexico is too large to be governed by our federal system of government, and he's ultimately right, even though Polk wants it. So we don't conquer all of Mexico, just that northern part. James K. Polk wanted this war, which is the interesting part behind it, and he instigated. General Zachary Taylor was sent by James K. Polk to defend Texas in the case of a Mexican invasion. This is that whole idea of where is the border. Is it the Nueces River or is it the Rio Grande River? John Slidell, sent as a secret envoy by James K. Polk to Mexico to establish the Rio Grande as a border between Mexico and Texas. So he's looking for a secret deal. We're going to give them something. It's a negotiation about money, about other pieces of land, possibly, and some trade agreements. But that's what Slidell is working on. Colonel Stephen Kearny was also sent by James K. Polk to New Mexico and California in 1846, and he captured Santa Fe. And General Winfield Scott captured Mexico City and ended the Mexican-American War. Just think about how far south Mexico City is. We really could have had a big part of Mexico, but governing it would have been very, very difficult. Not only governing it, but getting along with the different cultural norms in Mexico really would have been tough. It would have been interesting to see how it all would have worked out, though. Once again, here's that disputed border I was talking about. Is it going to be the Rio Grande, which is one heck of a long river, and of course we wanted that one, or is it going to be the Nueces River, which is the border that the Mexicans want, and ultimately when the war was settled, we would get the Rio Grande River as the boundary between the United States and Mexico. This is the Mexican Cession. It's a huge part of land, a huge part of land. A guy by the name of David Wilmot had what was called the Wilmot Proviso, and the Wilmot Proviso basically stated that all of the land in the Mexican Cession should be free from slavery. Of course, that's not going to happen. And Henry Clay comes along as part of his compromise of 1850 and says, why don't we suggest to everybody this idea of popular sovereignty? And it's so funny, it worked really well. In the compromise of 1850, one of the tenets of the very, it was an omnibus bill. There are a lot of pieces to this. Omnibus meaning many. Omnibus bill is a lot of parts of it. Compromise of 1850 was an omnibus bill which became law. But in either case, we're going to get popular sovereignty as proposed by Henry Clay with some help from Stephen Douglas. And this part of what would become the United States was going to be able to choose free or slave. Of course, no one's going to live there. So it's not ever going to be a problem because who's going to live in the desert? We'll throw the Indians in the desert because they'll figure it out. The white guys aren't going to go there, of course, but we'll put the Indians there. Anyway, so this is a huge piece of land, and as you can see, Oregon again, and we are developing in chunks. The Compromise of 1850 has to do with this piece of land back here, down here on the west coast called California. And the Compromise of 1850 was interesting because we had Zachary Taylor as president, followed by Millard Fillmore as president. Zachary Taylor took over after James K. Polk. Zachary Taylor dies in the middle of the debate because Zachary Taylor thought that there should be no debate, no compromise, California free, and that's it. But of course, the president doesn't have that power. That's a congressional question. States join the United States by writing a constitution and submitting it to the Senate. Congress debates it, and when they ultimately accept that constitution, voila, it's part of the United States. So, the Compromise of 1850 is basically going to say that California will be a free state, and that people living in the southern part of the United States will decide for themselves, called popular sovereignty. Well, Zachary Taylor was president at the time. He said, no, that's ridiculous. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this because California is obviously a free state. Slavery did not take hold there. People didn't move in with slaves. It should be a free state. Of course, the southern part of the United States doesn't quite agree. There's a huge debate going on. Well, in the middle of this debate, Zachary Taylor attends a 4th of July celebration, if you like, for the groundwork for the Washington Monument. And at that 4th of July celebration, he eats cherries and drinks warm milk. Dies shortly thereafter from gastroenteritis. Of course, they weren't sure if he'd been poisoned, but that's a completely different conspiracy thought, but he dies. And Millard Fillmore becomes president of the United States. And Millard Fillmore says, let's work out this compromise. And he agrees to sign the Compromise of 1850. And when he signs the Compromise of 1850, what it does is California free, popular sovereignty for the New Mexico Territory, fugitive slave law for the rest of the country, and we are going to start the decade of crisis with a huge argument over, well, do you really want bounty hunters going to the streets of Massachusetts or the streets of New York and clubbing somebody over his head and returning him to slavery in an area that's free territory? And that's going to be the impetus for Harriet Beecher Stowe writing my all-time favorite book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. If you have not read Uncle Tom's Cabin, read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Don't read the notes, don't read the Spark Notes, don't watch any movie, the movies are terrible. Read it. And you will see what a powerful, powerful novel it is. One of the interesting parts about it is that Uncle Tom is often maligned in American society. He's often maligned in African American society as calling a black man an Uncle Tom if he capitulates with the white man. Really not true. If you read the book, you will see Uncle Tom is a wonderful person, and only by reading the book will you understand the point behind it. Anyway, commercial over. So the Compromise of 1850 is going to start the 1850s, a decade of crisis, off with a bang. Zachary Taylor said, died in the middle of the debate on July 9th, 1850, 5 days after that cherries and milk. His vice president adjusted the compromise to the South's liking. That's going to be Millard Fillmore. By the way, Millard Fillmore, often thought to be one of the worst presidents in American history. I will go with James Buchanan as my worst president in American history because he kind of watches the South and sees, no big deal. But opinions are opinions. Anyway, as a result, we're going to have 15 slave states, 16 free states, and the compromise avoided the issue of slavery one more time. And we get California. And here's what the United States looks like after the Compromise of 1850. Remember, the big thing that spurred the Compromise of 1850 was the discovery of gold in California. Once gold was discovered in California, that spurred the population growth in California, and once the population growth is spurred in California, we're going to have the debate, California free or slave. Now, politics being politics, we're going to move along, 1854. So 1850, Compromise of 1850. 1851 to 1852. 1851 is going to be the Fugitive Slave Act. 1851 to 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin will be released by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It is serialized. It occurs week by week by week by week in publication around the United States as an ongoing story. It's about 45 to 46 chapters. So it went for 45 to 46 weeks straight. Of course, week by week, people wondered what was going to happen. It was so popular. Then the book is printed. So please understand that. One of the powerful things about Uncle Tom's Cabin is it's part of the public consciousness every week. There was a weekly chapter printed, and you always wondered what was going to happen. And each chapter ended up with some kind of cliffhanger. I don't know if she invented the cliffhanger, but boy, she used it really well. So Uncle Tom's Cabin is really going to spur things up in this time period. And now we're going to move further here, and people will wonder, gee, what's going to happen in the United States over the issue of slavery? Now we get to 1854. Millard Fillmore had been a very weak president, and we needed a strong president. We'd actually had two weak presidents in Zachary Taylor and Millard Fillmore at this time, all rough and ready, to now Millard Fillmore. There's even the Millard Fillmore Foundation, which used to get together every year on his birthday and visit his grave and make fun of him, which is really kind of sad if you think about it. I don't know if anyone's offended now, and I'm not sure when it started, but it's pretty offensive. Anyway, so here we're going to have Stephen A. Douglas. Stephen Douglas wants to be president of the United States. He's about this big. I'm 6 feet tall, to give you an idea. Lincoln was up to here. Lincoln was taller. And Stephen Douglas right about there, to give you an idea. He wants to be president. He's very popular. He's very popular. He's a Democrat. And he says, you know what? I think it would be great for the nation if we had a railroad that goes coast to coast. So he said he proposes that the railroad, which now already extends into Missouri, be continued into Kansas territory and all the way out to California. Remember, the gold rush made California a very popular place. So he says, I've got an idea. Let's build this railroad. And some people say, well, who's going to use this railroad? And he says, well, when people move into Kansas, when Kansas becomes a state, the people in Kansas will use this railroad. And then the question is, well, what do we do about Kansas wanting to become a state? The people moving to Kansas, are they going to have slaves? They're not going to have slaves? And Stephen Douglas says, wait a minute, I got a solution for this. The people in Kansas will decide for themselves. popular sovereignty. So the people in Kansas get to decide if they want slavery. It worked in the Mexican Cession. Excuse me, Mr. Douglas. Nobody moved into that land, so there's never an argument. People are going to move into Kansas because you're building a railroad. So he said, nah, it'll work. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act passes in 1854, and the basic idea of it is that when states are added to the United States from existing territories, the people in the state will decide for themselves. They will vote popular sovereignty. That will decide slave or free. Now, just think about this for a second. You need 50,000 voters to vote on a state constitution to then ask to be part of the United States as a state. Prior to that, you were simply a territory governed by a marshal. And there is no state government. It's federal government governing those territories. So, what's going to happen? Missouri borders Kansas. Missouri wants to extend slavery. So they start sending in as many people from Missouri to Kansas as they can. And those people are going to get the nickname of border ruffians. Whoa, can't do that. Can't just throw all the pro-slave people into Missouri. That's not going to work because there's a new group, the New England Emigrant Aid Society. And they are up in this part of the United States. And that New England Emigrant Aid Society is definitely anti-slave. They're also anti-Irish. So here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to take our immigrants and we're going to say, go to Kansas. Go to Kansas and you will be able to homestead and get free land. Just go there. And, of course, they're all anti-slave. So the New England Emigrant Aid Society, remember, emigrant people leaving, they're aiding people to leave New England. And those people leaving New England, where are they going to go? They're going to go to Kansas. They're going to go to Kansas, and what's going to happen when they get to Kansas? They're going to fight the border ruffians. So New England Emigrant Aid Society is going to send people called free soilers into Kansas. So here come the free soilers. And then people from Missouri are going to send border ruffians into Kansas. And I don't know if they meet around the N or the S, but you're going to have these competing forces settling Kansas at the same time. Imagine a group of people from New England settling a farm and a group of people from Kansas right next to them. And right next to them, maybe they have adjoining trails leading to their house. You have one guy with slaves and one group violently or vehemently anti-slave. Imagine the tension. And they're going to clash. And that clash is going to lead to all kinds of crazy stuff. There's going to be an event that occurs at Lecompton, and it's going to be called the Lecompton Constitution. And basically the border ruffians chase away the free soilers, and they're going to say, okay, Kansas voted to be a slave state. Crazy, crazy stuff. But that is what's going to happen as a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And Stephen Douglas' great idea is going to look like a terrible idea in time. Nevertheless, that is the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. What a mess. It's called Bleeding Kansas as they fight with each other. As I said, border ruffians from Missouri, a slave state, rushed into Kansas to ensure it would become a slave state. Free soilers also moved to Kansas to make it a free state. They come from what's group called the New England Immigrant Aid Society. In the 1855 election, a year after this, there's a vote, free or slave. Strange enough, when they counted up those votes, I don't know if you're surprised, there were more votes cast than there were people in the territory. How could that happen? Voter fraud? Oh, yes. The tension between the two groups resulted in a bloody conflict. Now, that conflict spilled over into Congress. We had something called the Sumner Brooks Affair, which we'll get into. It's going to lead to the whole idea of what should happen. Because now we're going to have people trying to kill each other in Congress. But that is in topic 11 in chapter 15 in Farragher's Alabama, which will be the next presentation. This is from chapter 14 in Farragher's Alabama. Remember, you don't need to use that book. This simply is going in order with that book, the table of contents in that book, so I can keep track of topics. So here's what we look like with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Here is the Kansas territory. And here's Nebraska territory. And we have this piece of land that's not yet organized. We have the New Mexico Territory, the Utah Territory, and Kansas, when it has enough people, will be able to vote on whether it's going to be free or slave. In the meantime, they're going to be killing each other. It's going to really foreshadow the Civil War. To summarize, this is what the United States is going to look like after we get the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, after we're done with the Mexican Cession, annexing Texas, getting the Oregon Territory. We have a bunch of pieces that fit together like a puzzle. So here's the question. Once we've fulfilled our manifest destiny, once that's done, now what? It's going to be civil war. Because the only thing that was holding us together was that idea of expansion. Once expansion is achieved, all bets are off. Okay, now I'm going to end this video, topic 10.2, and I'm going to try some quiz questions as we take a look at College Board questions that accompany this, just so we can kind of walk through this. This is a wide open topic, and taking a look at these questions might be useful. So I'm going to show those questions and I'm going to talk through the answers with you. So I'm going to leave this here and I'll see you in a few minutes. Take care.